Paul Stanhope and I first met as students on National Music Camp, I think in about 1994. And then we were members of a share house in Newtown when I first moved to Sydney. So I was going to make all these gags about bohemian living, given the amount of other bohemian music on the program. But people of better taste intervened. And so instead, I would just like to introduce you to Paul Stanhope as Musica Viva's featured composer for 2010. As the creator of some very fine music and also what I think is very distinctively Australian and beautiful music. Paul, you grew up in Wollongong and I know you happened to do quite well at school and could have chosen just about any career. Why did you choose composing?
I often wonder that. And I guess the answer is I didn't immediately just go out of school and start thinking of composition as a career. In fact, it's not really a career in itself. I studied music as part of an arts degree, and gradually as I progressed through that degree and decided that playing piano was probably not going to be part of a living for me, that composing seemed to become more a part of my life. And after some encouragement from Peter Sculthorpe, very influential composer and lovely man, it really kind of prompted me to explore this further, and so I was starting to get some performances of pieces. I entered pieces in competitions, which I won some, and it started to get me thinking, well, maybe I should take this a bit further. But it's something that has evolved over quite a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. So if you have those occasional dark days where you think, oh, what if I'd chosen something else? What kind of things might you have done?
Look, I may well have gone and studied law. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wonder whether I should have done that.
Yeah, we all would have done that.
Yeah, like everyone else. That's right. Perhaps gone into teaching.
Okay, well, you're stuck with it.
I've stuck with it, yeah.
You know, why is it important to you?
It's something that I can't always put a finger on, but it is an outlet for ideas, a conduit for expressing ideas, and for the just sheer physicality of the experience of music and hearing when you have your thoughts manifested in this very unique and really extraordinary medium. There's nothing quite like it.
People outside the industry are often interested in what an artistic life is really like, and I know that in common with lots of other creative artists, you're trying to have it all. You've got a bit of a day job, you've got family responsibilities, and of course, ideally you'd like unlimited time to create as well. So could you tell us a bit about what that's like, a day in the life of Paul Stanhope, composer?
Day in the life of composer is actually quite boring. It involves going into the studio in the morning, or it's a little room, actually, a little composing room, and it's very much this kind of very dull, hour-by-hour plodding experience. It takes.
You make it sound so much fun.
But where all the liveliness is going on is kind of, it's in the internal world. And what's happening internally, and it's it's this real wrestling with the material, and it doesn't stop either from outside office hours. It keeps going when you're riding on your bike or when you're walking down the road, and in fact some of the best composing is done when I'm I'm not in the space, I think, sometimes, and there's time to contemplate. So it's done in between all sorts of things. It is a much more methodical process, I think, that most people consider, and it's something which really is a very slow motion experience. It's also something. It reminds me of something that Stravinsky said is that in composing, it's something that you can't let go. It's an idea which you're always thinking about, and you're always fascinated by the ideas of music in the abstract. And I think there's a core of truth in that, because it's the ideas and the integrity of the ideas in themselves are so interesting and are so fascinating that you can't actually leave them alone.
All right, well, let's talk about some specifics of composing. I've seen you at parties. I know how well you play piano. Do you find yourself particularly drawn to keyboard works?
Look, I can play the piano well enough to use it as a composition tool. I studied it to a certain degree, and it's a very, very useful thing as a composer to be able to play what you write. And for works with piano in them, it's very useful to have the finger positions. But it's not completely necessary to have that skill as a composer. I know many fine composers who are not pianists and manage things very well. But really, writing for piano is only good if you get to choose that. And often the cases that you don't get to choose, and in fact, it's commissions that specify what you write for.
So let's talk about that, because here you are with a new string quartet.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I did want to ask you was about, does knowing who it's for in terms of the performers make a difference to the way that you would approach the piece? Do you instantly sort of get a sound, or do you have to research them a bit? Yes,
it's a bit of both. It's very, very useful to know the personality and the playing style of the group. And when I heard the Pavel Haas Quartet play, I got a very vivid sense of the kind of ferocity and the great energy with which they approach the performances of Janacek and Beethoven and things like that. And so I got a real sense of that, and I think some of that has made its way into the quartet. Having said that, there's also an aspect of it being writing for the string quartet as an ideal medium, or a medium in the abstract in which you're writing for any group, because you hope that the piece will then go on to be performed by other groups.
Because when I was thinking about previous works of yours that I know, and I did think about Morning Star, which I think was your first string quartet, but certainly one that is a bit of a landmark piece for me. And I think what I notice about that piece is it falls to me quite within what I guess we could call almost a traditional classical Australian style. You know, now that we're in the 21st century, there's references about Indigenous culture and landscape pieces and things like this within a very, there's lots of a sort of very attractive dancey feel to it. But I know that since then you've gone on to write other string quartets. What have you learnt writing those along the way that you've brought to this new string quartet? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, that piece Morning Star seems like a whole lifetime ago for me now. I mean, I was only 21 or 22 when I wrote that. And then, that's right, there have been a series of other pieces for quartet. The next one was 2004, Dancing with Strangers. So the first two were kind of these micro quartets. They're pieces not more than about 12 minutes. And the two pieces which are now the numbered quartets, string quartet number 1 and number 2, which have been written in the last 2 years, are quite different things in the sense that they are called string quartet. And I feel that there is a distinction between a piece which deserves that title, string quartet, and it's not just the fact that we're writing for 4 string players. It means something else. And there's the whole a weight of culture. That's right. There is that cultural weight behind it. There is the whole tradition of the centuries of quartet making, and the enormous complexity and the richness of that world. Also, some of the structural elements of the string quartet and what that means. It's kind of like saying something is a symphony rather than just a big orchestral piece. Yeah, well, rather than an overture or some other.